Recording in progress.
All right, welcome everyone. This meeting is now called to order and the roll has been taken. We'll remind everyone that this meeting is held in a hybrid format in accordance with Article 18 of the city's procedural bylaw. Staff and delegates participating virtually are reminded to keep their video and microphones off until requested by the chair or members of the committee. All cameras for virtual committee members shall remain on to ensure quorum. All members of the committee will vote by physical show of hands. Please leave your hand raised until the chair has determined the result of the vote. In the event of a connection or service interruption that affects quorum, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. So we'll move on into item 2, which is declarations of conflicts of interest. Are there any declarations with the agenda? Okay, we have some. Please go ahead first.
Do I just read the number of the item or the entire?
Read the number and the reason for your declaration for each.
So I have conflict of interest with 4.1. It's the 350 Brant Ave. I have a family member who works there, as well as 4.3. I sit on the board of the Historical Society and I'm vice chair.
Okay, anyone else with a conflict? Okay, Pat, go ahead.
I have a conflict with 4.3. I'm on the board of the Historical Society.
Okay. Anyone else with a conflict? Oh, Dan. Okay.
4.3, the owner.
Okay. Anyone else with a conflict? Oh, Bev, there's conflict of interest right here. Okay.
4.3.
4.3 as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason for that.
Any reason? Yeah.
Oh, just because I'm working on one part of the frustration.
Okay. Anyone else with a conflict? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on. There's no presentations or delegations. So we have a long agenda, so hopefully we can be quick and expedient tonight. But the first item is the notice of intention to demolish an accessory structure at 350 Brant Avenue. So we have Rachel Newenhouse here to come forward to speak to the application. No?
She registered.
Registered, not in the room. Okay.
She'll be here tomorrow.
Okay, so then we'll move on to Michelle then, in your report. Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay. Good evening, Chair and committee members. My name is Michelle Adresse. I'm a policy planner with the city, and I will be presenting the notice of intention to demolish a greenhouse at 350 Brant Avenue. It's also the site of the W. Ross McDonald School for the Blind. 350 Brant Avenue is a provincially owned, non-designated, listed property on the city's heritage register. The property was listed on August 25th, 2020 as Group A. When the property was listed, the listing states that the recommendation is for the entire parcel to be listed on the heritage register. And we should also make note that the city cannot designate provincially owned property. Next slide, please. This photo shows the greenhouse that is proposed to be demolished. It's not been in use by the school for a number of years. At this time, there's no plans for the site other than to plant grass in that area. Next slide. The criteria for listing properties on the Heritage Register can include several items, including the date of construction and defining future rules of cultural heritage significance. The greenhouse does not predate the incorporation of the city of Brantford in 1877, nor does the greenhouse have any defining features of cultural heritage significance in comparison to the other buildings on the property. The Heritage Register project considers primary buildings and not accessory structures. This 1892 map of Brantford shows the W. Ross McDonald School with the original building. Kind of see that on the north end of the site. Next slide. This 1919 Brantford fire insurance map also shows the property and the location of the original building on the site as well. Next slide. These photos show one of the buildings on the site that does possess archaeological significance, architectural significance, sorry. This is a Margaret Chandler Heritage House, showing the Gothic Revival style. Next slide. This photo shows another significant building on the site. This is the superintendent's house, showing Victorian, eclectic, and Gothic Revival styles. Next slide. The removal of the greenhouse will not negatively impact the cultural heritage value or interest of the property, which is still provided by other more prominent buildings on the site. And next slide. This is showing the recommendation. So the item was deferred at the August 13th committee of the whole meeting so that Heritage Committee could review this request for demolition. So the recommendation as follows: a staff report 2024-532, titled Notice of Intention to Demolish Accessory Structure at 350 Brant Avenue, a non-designated listed property on the City of Brantford's Heritage Register, be received. And we would like to gather some comments from the Heritage Committee to bring forward to the council meeting tomorrow night. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Anyone have any questions for staff? Dan, go ahead.
Do we know the age of the greenhouse?
We don't know the exact age. We're thinking around the 1960s.
Oh, okay. Because sometimes greenhouses have ornate wrought iron to them, features to them, rather than just a regular square tubing type structure. I couldn't really tell by the picture, but if it's, I don't know how fancy it is.
It's not fancy at all.
Oh.
It is very basic, and I don't know if you can tell from the photo, but there's trees actually growing in it and out of it. Like it's been in disrepair for a number of years. They no longer run that gardening program.
Any other questions for staff? Beth, go ahead.
Just a comment. A number of years ago, there was an archaeological assessment carried out of the complete property. And a number of sites were identified, some of which were recommended for stage 3. And just wanted to question whether or not anyone's looked at those against the location of the greenhouse, because if it's in the vicinity, just want to be cautious about the demolition activities. If that is the case, that there's been something
Through the
registered.
chair, we have not been given any information that would lead to that. I could definitely check the applicant to ensure that the process is followed. Sure the sites are not disturbed.
Yeah, it was done at the time that the master plan for the entire campus was created, so that they knew where the best locations to add additional structures would be. Okay.
Do you know when that happened? Roughly a year? No.
No, I don't remember. It's been some time. It's probably been about 15 years at least.
Sorry.
Probably about 15 years.
15, okay.
Any other questions for staff? I have one. You said at the beginning that the cannot designate provincially owned buildings.
Yeah.
That's part of the Ontario Heritage Act.
So,
I'll let Patrick speak to that.
so through the chair, yes, I can speak to that. So yeah, the parts that let us designate property as municipalities explicitly say we can't designate provincially owned property that's referenced in the earlier part 3 of the act. But we can list them. And so the function was always to be a sort of a notice to the province that, you know, this property you own is important to us in the municipality. It adds to our community character and history. But it was more a trigger for discussion rather than an ability to actually like control whether the province can or cannot demolish or alter its own properties.
Yeah, that's good. That's
Yeah.
helpful information. Because yeah, it seems weird that we're able to list it on the register but not fully designate it. And I know the province actually does have its own designation program, and that is one of the most designated sites in possibly in Brantford by the province anyways. And all of those buildings that that Michelle showed, the true original kind of architectural style like Margaret Chandler House and the principal's residence, they all have significant designations on them, and the province has actually started repairing Margaret Chandler House a little bit over the last couple of years. So it's good to see some life being brought back into those heritage buildings and structures. Any other questions for staff before we move on? Okay, thanks, Michelle. Appreciate that. So there's a motion that we receive and provide comments. Does anyone have any comments that they would like to add? If not, then we can just have a motion to receive. Any comments from any members of the committee? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to receive then. Made by Sandra, seconded by Pat. Any other discussion on the motion to receive? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. I declare that carried. Okay, we'll move on to item 4.2. Please. We have received a late delegation request. Should the committee wish, I would ask if anyone would move a motion to waive the rules that section 15.6.2 of the procedural bylaw be waived to permit delegation past the prescribed deadline. Moved by Councillor Samuel, seconder. Dan, any discussion on the waiving of the rules? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. I declare that carried. So I'll ask Daryl Craig to come forward as the applicant. As a reminder, you have 10 minutes inclusive of questions.
Thank you. So my name is Daryl Craig. I'm the owner, one of the owners of 50 Dufferin, and staff has done a great job, and I just wanted to be here to answer any of your questions in person. But the bottom line is we'd like to install solar panels on our heritage home at 50 Dufferin, keeping most of the solar panels at the back of the house, which is south and east, well off the street view, also stated in the staff report. And really early this morning, hopefully you all got a copy of our engineering report saying that the roof could handle it. Just really quick visual. This is the old slate that used to be on it, which is weighing about 5 pounds in my hands right now, versus the quarter pound what was approved in 2019 by this committee. So the roof was designed to handle a lot more than it is, but don't believe that the engineer report's there as well. So just wanted to give you guys a chance to answer any of your questions you have.
Okay, thank you so much. Any members have any questions for us? Okay, Dan Brown. Go ahead.
So did the engineers go up in the attic, or was it just a calculation of?
Oh, they physically went in the attic.
They did.
Yeah.
Anything else, Dan?
No.
Any other questions from any members of the committee? When you replaced the slate roof, you did do the entire roof, right?
Everything except the actual turret.
Oh,
It's
the
still
turret.
its original slate, but the solar panels will not be on that, obviously. But
Okay.
At the start of your presentation, you said most of them will not be visible from the road, or
none should be visible.
None
from the
will,
roof,
okay.
and
So
then
the kind of-
you get the staff report, it will be much more clear, but there's nothing going to be visible from the street.
Okay, Dan?
Another question. So not visible from the street. I know they do a lot of filming down the street.
Mhm.
Do they do drone shots, or is there anything that would hinder any filming to happen on the street after that?
What's beside us right now is 54 Dufferin, which is a list of condos. It's a parking lot that would be viewing there. So the chances of them filming there are highly unlikely. They actually did film on our house and 54 Dufferin, and they used the front, not the back, which is all paid parking lot right now.
That's right, Chair, I think. Okay, any other questions for our delegate? Oh, Beth, go ahead, sorry.
Just for future reference, because the question of roofing comes up a lot. at committee. And you're really happy with this product that you've used, the,
The synthetic slate. Yeah.
okay. And is it a lot more expensive than a slate or an asphalt shingle, or is it?
It's a lot more expensive. Just to give you an indication, it was about $110,000 to do it with the synthetic slate, which is from Cambridge, Ontario,
Okay,
called Authentic Roof, and slate would have cost about $300,000.
okay. And what is the life expectancy of this product?
It's warranted for 50 years.
Thank you.
No problem.
Some good additional questions there. Okay,
Thank you.
if no one else has any questions, we'll move on to the staff report. Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to put the PowerPoint up and I'll share it from my laptop. Okay, so thank you, Chair. So this is just a staff overview of application HA 0524. So as is noted in the staff report, and just for context for those, the property is individually designated. There's one bylaw on title. We've attached that bylaw to the staff report as Appendix C, but that's the bylaw that sets out all the heritage attributes. Sort of as discussed, the slate roof is one of the heritage attributes, but it was replaced. The slates were quite deteriorated and home to some moss and lichens that were causing slate tiles to fall off. So the roof has been fully replaced except for the turret, as was noted. And then just for context, the property is on the southwest side of Dufferin Avenue. This would be northwest of the intersection with Lauren Crescent. So we've attached the submission materials, but I think the site plan that was provided by the solar contractor really does tell the story. The solar panels are being installed on the south and east sides of the roof. It's a very steep slope, but that front corner turret and just the size of the roof will do an effective job of screening those solar panels from the street. That is one of the main impacts we consider. We have the supporting materials provided that show the types of brackets. Looking at the company that provides that bracket, they have different ways of installing. Brackets can either be installed under existing shingles, sort of just like the shingle lifted, the bracket installed, and then the shingle just rests on top of that, waterproofing it. The company also makes a metal sort of shingle replacement that can also slide over top of the L bracket that holds the solar panels. So there are ways to make sure that water entry doesn't happen. That is one of the bigger concerns with solar panels. If not installed properly, you are putting a hole in the roofing membrane. But this product does, it is designed to address that issue. Also, just for a note, when it comes to installing solar panels on buildings directly, building permits are required. So that will have an actual plans review done by city staff and building services, and there will be inspections through that process to make sure the permit is being implemented and the building code is being followed as installation happens. So from the perspective of the standards and guidelines, alterations to historic properties are allowed. What we're considering is, does the alteration negatively impact the heritage value of the building and the property? Does the alteration result in changes that can't be undone? If changes can be undone, can it look seamless like it was never there? And in all cases, if the staff opinion is that yes, something is being installed on a roof, there are appropriate ways to make sure water entry doesn't occur. And this is an alteration that will not negatively affect the appearance of the building and can be undone. The roof can be returned to its current state very easily. Those holes can be sealed up where the mounting was done. With the slate roof, slate being quite heavy, and this is a very big roof, quite steep, and you can see the number of cross gables on the sides, the rear, there's the corner turret, there's a very complex roof lines. Now that we see the engineer's report, this is a roof that was designed to carry heavy loads. The slope of the roof will help make sure that the solar panels don't accumulate snow and add even more weight. It will shed the snow and the water pretty effectively given the pitch. So all things considered, staff recommend, the report be received, but that the heritage permit be approved. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Okay, questions for Patrick?
I'll go back to that slide just to benefit anyone who wants to reference it.
Dan, go ahead.
Is there any concern with the apartment building next door with the solar panels? with Light coming off, or reflecting from the sun, or with the,
Well, the angle is, it is going to bounce light in a direction, but I think given the height of the sun, it'd be very tricky well, it would be tricky to confirm the exact path the sun will take. But given the low rise, you're not bouncing light down into a low space like you would have with a high rise building. I think you might remember there were stories of a creatively designed building, possibly in the United Kingdom, in London, and the curve actually acted as like a focusing lens, and someone's car either caught fire or partially melted. That's not the case here. These are facing upwards, so the sun is more likely than anything just to get bounced back up into the sky and be ambient light, I would think.
when you say they're facing upwards, are they,
Yeah, they'll be at like or parallel to the roof slope, so they'll be pointing up. Yeah,
on an angle?
yeah, they're not,
Yeah.
but they're not focusing the light onto one point in the ground.
Any other questions for Patrick? Sandra, go
Well,
ahead.
I just want to say I'm really glad that that's got such a slope. We personally have these solar panels, and without that slope, it does accumulate a little bit, and then you get big masses coming down. So, and I look at the design of your the roof with the front entrance, and that's really well done, because that's going to save that snow coming down, you know, where there's going to be people. So that's good.
Okay. Okay, Dan, you have another question.
When the synthetic slate was installed, were there snowbirds installed along the bottom to catch any of that snow or snow guards?
That I can't say for sure on the sides. It doesn't look like they were installed on the front slope or the front gable. I'd have to defer to the property owner if they have any of those snow guards on the sides or rear.
Just seems quite a slide with, if there is a buildup, like she said, then they couldn't slide on onto the apartment building.
There is a driveway there. It's quite a space between the apartment building and the roof of this property.
Okay, any other questions from members of the committee? Looking to our virtual committee members, making sure I'm not ignoring you. Okay, Lise?
Just a couple comments. I just liked that, because I don't think I've ever been to a meeting where I've had anything like that before. So I thought it was sympathetic to what our exists respects the existing built heritage. I actually love that we're seeing such an old building having some new green sustainable technology. And I think this is a great example of it. And if you can know it's done right, it won't have worry about leakage or reflecting on things. I think that should be more encouraged. And I think it's a great example. Thank you.
Any other questions for Patrick? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Patrick. We have a motion then that this be received and that it be approved. Would anyone like to make that motion? I see Pat, and I think I saw that first. Just seconded. Any other discussion on this? I would just like to echo a little bit what Lee said about the environmental, impacts of this. We often see heritage structures being said, they're not environmentally friendly, or they're, not accessible. And how do we create heritage buildings that also have economic value in return to the community? And I think the installation of the solar panels helps that as well. Like I noted in the information provided by the applicant, they actually had a return period, like you save, it pays for itself within basically a dozen years. So these environmental, while this is a significant cost, capital cost to incur, it does pay benefits hugely in the long term. So, any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, I declare that carried. We'll now move on to item 4.3. So this is an application for a heritage grant for 53 Charlotte Street. Alan is here to speak to this application. That's in my roadmap. Is it Patrick?
I can speak to it. Do we have don't have an applicant registered?
Do not have an applicant.
Okay, well then I will start a staff presentation. Thank you, Chair. So this is just a staff presentation for a heritage grant application. The application is HG 0224. So some background on this particular project. 53 Charlotte Street currently is a non-designated property, but it is the receiving property for the Crystal Cottage. I see I forgot to put in the original designation bylaw for 35 Chatham Street. I do apologize, but the original property was designated under the Heritage Act. Application HDO 120 in 2020 was approved by council and facilitated the relocation of the Crystal Cottage. Traditionally, we see heritage grant applications for designated properties, and where for bigger projects there might be a corresponding heritage permit. Because the property is not designated, there's no heritage permit in this case, but we do have council direction to designate 53 Charlotte Street once all permits are completed and closed and the property has been restored and the cottage has been restored. And that's the subject matter for this grant application. So just for context, the property is located at the northeast corner of Charlotte Street and Wellington Street. So the nature of the work is masonry repairs at several locations around the building. When the cottage was relocated, it was originally expected that the developer who sort of triggered the move would be the party that was restoring the Crystal Cottage. Unfortunately, that process happened during the pandemic, and the developer did not survive the pandemic. They went bankrupt, and their development was taken over by another party to that file. But not the actual company that signed the agreement to move the cottage and restore it. The museum, the Brantford Historical Society, did what it could and invested quite a bit of money in trying to install the building properly on the foundation and carry out some work. Unfortunately, it was a big project and a bit beyond their scope. The yellow arrows in this drawing show some of the damage that originated from the move. We have, for example, in the bottom front corner, step cracks at the corner, numerous broken bottles in the glass courses, cracks in the stone sills and coping at the top of the rear, and gaps under some window sills. Just another example of damage. This is again the front corner, but viewed from Charlotte Street. So there's gaps at the sides of the windows, step cracks below the windows, and at the corner and brick courses that are coming loose. Similar damage can be found at other locations. Again, more examples of broken glass bottles and step cracks. So the way the grant program works is for larger projects, 2 quotes with the same scope of work are required to show costs. So the applicant provided 2 quotes. One showed $65,000 before tax, one showed $45,000 before tax. I'd also note the grant program, the maximum grant amount was increased by council. So it used to be $5,000. Now the maximum is $20,000. So quite an increase. So to determine the eligible funding, we take the eligible costs on the quote, divide it by 2. That gives us our maximum grant. In this case, the lower quote was $45,000. That works out to an eligible cost or maximum grant of $22,500. Given the cap, this application would receive the maximum of $20,000 in funding. Now, because this property is not designated yet, but we do have that direction. We do have grant agreements as part of the grant program. The applicants will have to sign that, but it will specify that under the Heritage Act, the actual grant can't flow until the property is designated. That has been discussed. So in light of this work, it is restoring a property that was designated. It's just by virtue of the building being moved, but there is every intent to protect the property. So in principle, it's recommended that the Heritage Grant application be approved. And then staff will make sure the relevant terms to comply with everything are handled in the grant agreement. So that concludes my presentation, but staff are happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Patrick about this item? I just have, I guess, a quick one. Because we did change the grant program to increase it.
Mhm.
And this is still part of the pilot program,
Yes,
and it goes until the end of this year.
end of next year.
End of next year.
So the current pot of money exists. Staff will report back by the end of next year to council with, any further tweaks to the program, or, even a stay the course recommendation, possibly asking for more funding. We have enough left in our pot, I think, for 3 grants at the maximum value. So we still will have a fair bit of funding left over after this application.
That was my concern a little bit, making sure that we had enough money to continue running the program until we get a top up from council. So if you're confident with that, that's good to hear.
And just for clarity then for the committee members, when we took the last updates to council for the grant program, it was also said we didn't need the funding at this time, but there are budget processes every year. It's a 4-year budget, but we can amend it every year if we need to, and we can request more funding if we see a draw. So we're not limited to this pot of money until the end of the program, but the pot of money is there until the end of the program. So we can ask for more.
Good clarification. Any other questions for Patrick? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask for a motion that this be received and that the heritage grant be approved. Anyone? I see Adam, and I see Councillor Samwell. Any discussion on this? Councillor Samwell?
I
go
would
ahead.
just say that I'm thrilled to see us approve this today if possible, and just to finally see that building gets the care that it deserves.
Very good. Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Okay, any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We'll have a brief moment while we gain some people back.
Like half the committee are-
Really.
I was like, do we have clearance to do anything?
Well, I think
Yeah.
the forums, as long as they're, like you count.
Oh, and
Once
the
they're
clerk's
ready,
items.
Yeah, we're good. I don't know how many you can get down to.
Okay, we have our people returned. Thank you very much. So we'll move right along to 10 Brant Avenue, Jubilee Terrace Park, and some work to be done there. We have Patrick or Adrian here, both of them.
Through the chair. So Adrienne is acting as sort of the applicant in this instance because it's another city department doing this work.
Okay,
So we can go to her first as yeah. She is here and available to speak to it. Do you want to call on her?
yeah, Adrian. Adrian, do you have anything that you want to say about this?
Hi all, thank you for taking the time to listen to my very brief presentation. This is a approval request for the addition of a second storyboard that complements the first storyboard that this committee approved last year. And this is an action item that came out of the War and Cenotaph report. And this is the last item as it pertains to the storyboard section of that report. I did send the second storyboard to Patrick. I don't know if everyone has seen that. I'm happy to share that on the screen, but it will model the same shape, style, format as the previous one that was approved by the group, and it will specifically be talking about the battle where the cannon was acquired, whereas the first storyboard was addressing kind of the history of how the cannon was actually given to the city. So there's slightly 2 different narratives that are being told.
Okay, perfect. The text of it is also included in the report as well. Any questions that anyone has for Adrian? No? Okay, great. Thanks, Adrian, for your work on this and moving it along. It's been, I know, a long project that's taken a couple of years more than expected. Patrick, you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is another staff presentation to give an overview of the heritage permit application. This is application HA 0624 for Jubilee Terrace Park. So just again, contextually, the property is designated individually. We've provided the designation bylaws and appendix to the staff report. It's located at the corner of Brant Avenue, Colburn Street, Lorne Bridge, and Icon Drive, and beside the Brantford Armories. It's just a map showing the extent of the actual park and its location in context to the intersection. It's at the northwest corner. So just to the proposal, well, Adrian has given the overview of the content. We did give you the text of the plaque in the staff report, and the design document from our city contractor is attached as Appendix D to the report. So what we're doing, the content, the photos have been decided upon and determined through that process with tourism staff. So this is about the actual installation in the park. Again, we consider whether installations or changes have impacts to heritage attributes. In this case, the German field howitzer is one of the listed heritage attributes in the park. In this case, the storyboard really just enhances that heritage attribute. It gives it context. It explains why it's located there. It doesn't detract. And again, this is the second of 2 storyboards. These are brought forward as heritage permits because we do traditionally look at signage as a heritage permit matter. In all considerations, staff feel that this is an appropriate and a good renovation to the park. It provides that context for the monument, which helps the public, the residents of Brantford, really engage with their history and broader themes and actions, in this case, going back to World War I. So ultimately, staff have reviewed it and recommend that the permit be approved. That concludes my staff presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Patrick? Please go ahead.
Obviously it's not part of this board, but I'm kind of wondering in the future, as far as accessibility wise, is there something that might be looked into making it like an audio story, even like with braille or because some places might have, like, I went to the Ontario Heritage Conference and some things where if you use the QR code or something, then it would give you that audio story.
That I can't speak to, and more because with the Heritage Act, it's only about physical features of a property, and that would be sort of the non-physical, the ephemeral. That is something that culture staff like Adrian is here. She can hear that. She may be able to take that back and through a future budget request, look at doing that on maybe a more comprehensive plan for a number of our art installations in the city. But that wouldn't be something we deal with as the Heritage Committee or under the Heritage Act. But it is something that can be looked into because it is a good point. It does just increase the accessibility literally of our art pieces and our history. So.
And when we passed the last sign, there was a discussion on, again, how someone might be able to get around that with a wheelchair. So has that all been taken into consideration that someone in a wheelchair can get in front and actually see them?
I think it's a rather large platform it's installed in. So I do think there is space to maneuver.
Any other questions? I remember that they did have quite a conversation about making sure that it was accessible to people. And the city invested a good chunk of money, I think, in creating walkways that people could actually get to Cannon, because they previously didn't really used to be able to get to it that well. So accessibility concerns are well noted. We have a motion that this be received and approved. Do we have a mover? I see Leeds, a seconder, Councillor Sullivan. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, I declare that carried then. Thank you very much. Moving right along, we'll go to the results of our potential heritage conservation district consultations. Patrick will speak about this item as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to get the summary slideshow up. on the screen. And this is just an overview of what staff had heard through the first, this is again the first phase of our neighborhood consultation. We do have 3 more neighborhoods actually. One was added in the summer. We will be doing those in the fall, September and October. So this is a first phase, and we're reporting back to council with the results. We're using the same strategy from these neighborhoods as we in the fall for the second phase. So just again, background. So it was January 30th of this year, we had the official direction to consult 5 neighborhoods. Again, a 6th was added after the first phase had been scheduled. And that was asking the neighborhoods about interest in becoming a heritage conservation district. There was also a question about if there would be, broad interest in neighborhood history being researched. So the 3 neighborhoods we did in the first phase are Waterloo Court, the north side of Dalhousie Street, and the Victory Housing Neighborhood in Ward 5 on each of the maps. We'll have a bigger version on each slide, and bigger images are available in the staff report, along with full copies of the boards we had on display, as well as the comments and sort of the .democracy responses. You can see how many people voted in favor or against certain architectural styles. That's all available in the staff report. So just in a quick summary, and then just by note, we did have a website for the project. Notices were sent out to each property owner in each potential district at a minimum of 2 weeks before the neighborhood meeting dates. And that was to ensure there was ample time to know about it, or even to reach out to staff. My email was included in all the notices. If they had questions, they were free to reach out. So the first neighborhood meeting we had was for Waterloo Court. It was held on Wednesday, May 29th. We had an afternoon and evening session here in Brantford City Hall in the Charlie Ward room. Ultimately, 5 property owners attended, 4 in the afternoon, 1 in the evening. As far as representation goes, it was 4 properties represented. So for one property, both owners showed up and both provided comments. Overall, that still only gives us a 36% representation rate for properties in the district. For 3 of the 4 properties, the owners were interested in the HCD designation. All 5 owners who attended were in favor of the history being researched. And we had 1 email follow-up after the session, just asking, just sort of general sense, what the response had been, because they had come in the afternoon, they didn't come back in the evening. Now, our recommendation, you might recall when we came to the committee last on these consultations, we said for a heritage district to succeed, you generally need a supermajority of support. A simple majority, 50% of owners plus 1. Projects like that are not likely to succeed if you're going for a district. And unfortunately, with only 36% of properties represented, that's not enough that staff feel comfortable that a district project would succeed. Again, they can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. There is a bigger project to do the research and tailor those policies in a district plan to the neighborhood. They really do benefit from neighborhood interest. And even though there was a small size to this neighborhood, we didn't really see that. Those who attended were very interested in their neighborhood's history, but that interest did not seem to extend beyond the afternoon meeting. We had 1 owner come in the evening. They were interested. We heard them talking about neighbors who might like this project, and then the attendance kind of petered out really quickly. So again, we won't be recommending the district, and with only 36% interest, it is tricky to really see that there's a strong interest in even the history being told in a way that is publicly supported by the city, with the research funding, the hiring of a researcher to spend the time to do that, and then preparing those documents. So for this district, or potential district, though small, we're not recommending it move forward at this time. For downtown, the north side of Dalhousie Street, the meeting was also held at City Hall. The meetings were held on June 6th. Again, we had an afternoon and evening sessions. a mail was sent out 2 weeks in advance to the property owners. Unlike other districts, the properties in the north side of Dalhousie Street are primarily owned for income purposes. They are, the landlords expect a commercial return out of their property. They're not resident owned like a residential property would. In talking to the downtown BIA, we heard from them, they also had challenges reaching out to property owners and getting their buy-in and their attendance at meetings and supporting, just BIA initiatives in the downtown. So we acknowledge there was a bit of a challenge getting any guaranteed receipt of notices with this district. Ultimately, we received attendance from 2 property owners. Now, they did own multiple properties in one case, so that turns out 2 property owners represent 5 properties. That's 22% of properties recommended. That's still less than a quarter. Both the owners who attended weren't interested in the district as a whole. They were interested in the historic research. One owner did say, while they weren't interested in a district, they would be open to ongoing discussion about some of their properties, maybe being designated individually. So that's going to be an ongoing conversation staff have between us and that owner. And when staff feel, there's something to bring to council about designation with talking with the owner if they have interest, then certainly the committee will be involved in those plans, because the committee has that role of advising council on designation. So if that pans out, you will see something about designation in the downtown, but it will be individual properties. So again, right now, we don't recommend a heritage conservation district nor historic research, but I'd note that we only consulted a small section of the street. There may be opportunities to do a more fulsome historic research project in the future that's not limited just the north side of Dalhousie, and could talk about historic structures throughout the downtown, have a bit more of a comprehensive project, but we're just not recommending it right now and so focused, because we didn't really have that buy-in. Lastly, in the first phase was the Victory Housing Neighborhood in Ward 5. This set of neighborhood meetings was held on June 10th, as before, with afternoon and evening sessions. This one we were able to book Doug Snook's Eagle Place Community Center. We were in the upstairs room. We set up 2 sets of display boards in this case, and had a good flow, we felt, of people attending the neighborhood meeting. But ultimately, in terms of responses that we can really quantify, 17 properties were represented with responding owners. Others did come in. A number of individuals very explicitly told us they were here to see what was being discussed, but had varying sentiments. Someone did say to me, I just want my property left alone. Those weren't the owners who were responding. We also had a number of people attend who didn't live in the neighborhood. They did tell us that. So while they gave forms saying, yes, I think a district should be designated, yes, I think there should be historic research, those were filtered out because we were asking the property owners. There was a bit of discussion online about this one, but again, it turned out to be about 17 property owners responding. So that's 9% of properties represented with a response rate. In this case, results were mixed. We've broken it down. 7 property owners were in favor of a district, 10 were opposed, 11 were in favor of history being researched, 6 respondents were not interested even in the history. So once again, this was the lowest response rate. We don't recommend the project moving forward. As far as historic research in this neighborhood, this neighborhood has a very specific history, which is why it was targeted as a potential district. But we're not recommending history goes forward at this time. Maybe there's still opportunities for a broader consideration of neighborhood history for all of Eagle Place. We're not ruling anything out in the future, but this neighborhood did not show interest in the project at this time. So should council want, council can make decisions about, do some of these projects move ahead? We're saying as staff, based on what we heard from the property owners themselves, there just did not seem to be a lot of interest in these projects. It is something we've heard too, that it's very difficult to get public participation in government initiatives across the board. We seem to be a victim of that to some extent, but heritage is always one of those tricky subjects that people, they do have concerns. They do have notions of what it means. We had a lot of good conversation. I myself got to speak to a lot of residents, and some of them did legitimately come in thinking, I don't want any part of this, and thought, okay, now that I've had a chance to talk to you and you answered my questions and you listened to me and we went through examples, I'm not feeling it, but I know more about heritage. And that's why we chose a Q&A, not a sit-down presentation, but a drop-in PIC. Again, members of the committee can look at the appendices. We've attached the full display boards that were provided. They had a mix of neighborhood history, examples of other districts that were similar. For context, examples of renovations you could do and where permits might be needed and heritage review is triggered. So all that was available to the property owners. But that first phase, we did not really get that level of participation that would be necessary for these projects to succeed. So with that, what staff are recommending to the committee is receive the report for information, but also you have an opportunity to provide comments to staff. We are bringing these results to council in September in that cycle. Any comments you provide will be provided to council as part of our reports. So with that, I end my presentation and I'm happy to answer questions of the committee.
I think we're gonna have some questions. Okay, Sandra, go ahead.
This is more of maybe an observation than a question, and I'm looking at the term insufficient interest in something like this, and I don't think people realize the seriousness of it either way, the financial implications and whatever. And to see such low response rates, like even the people that were dead set against this would come out, and the people that for it were come out. And I'm looking, like I can't believe there's that many people, if they got that information, had no opinion at all. This is to me, a very black and white opinion thing, because it does affect your property. So I don't know if maybe it was the timing of the year, still how we're trying to communicate. I'm going to put downtown in a different place because these are residents here and that they live there, so they're a little easier. But I think, like in any, I would hate to make decisions based on so little information, because you're not even getting the negative information. So I'm not even looking at the buy-in. I'm looking at people that are dead set against it, did not come out. So I'm just curious where, like, I'm just saying the conclusion, I don't think is really the right conclusion.
I can answer a question or I can listen to feedback. So I didn't hear a question there, so I'm just gonna not.
Okay, no, I get it, but I'm just putting
Just to
this
be, yeah, no, I'm happy to answer,
out
and
there.
I am happy to answer questions. So if you do have a specific question too that you want to pose to me.
Well, it's hard because I just don't have a lot of faith in the conclusion. So I would like it. How about can you rewrite this and maybe put in exactly kind of some of the things I'm saying is that we didn't get the conversation, we didn't get the input. And again, I'd like to say, if this was a property, and again, not counting downtown, my home and the implications, I'd want to find out, but there should be there's no such thing as a gray. You're for it or you're against it. And I'm not seeing even, like, there should be more than 9% or 20% of people that should be there. So
we're on questions, Rebecca. On questions. I had Councillor Samwell written down, but I'll write the other two. Go ahead.
All right, so I guess, being at all of the sessions for, at least for the Victory Housing and for the downtown, I just wanted to mention the fact that, and this will come to a question at the end, don't worry. But I think that it also speaks to the fact that we need to work on getting the message out about heritage and about streamlining that system so people aren't feeling like it holds them back from doing what they need to do with their properties, and to get the proper information out. because that was a big piece of what I noted with this, was that people had no idea what it actually meant and were very afraid of what it actually meant. I also would say that there was a lot of good conversations that I had in being, especially at the Victory Housing one, where people were very interested in the history and all of that. So whether it's the district itself, I would like to see if there's a way to do something to recognize the history of that area. Maybe it is looking for more feedback or whatever that needs to be. But my question is what can we do to maybe do something to recognize the effort that has been put in and the interest that is there?
So through councillor, or to you, councillor, through the chair. So, I mean, we did have some interest, yes, for the neighborhood history. So council could feel that that's a sufficient bar, that we had some interest. Let's look at, taking that and giving a budget to get someone to do proper, historic research that looks at more than just local records, but look at some of those broader trends that we can share. There's a park nearby, there is space, we could look at it there, but we're just saying, with the limited resources we allocated to the first round of consultation, we don't have a project budget to hold multiple meetings in the neighborhood, to do multiple mail outs. We did have frequently asked questions on our website that people could look at. The link was right there with a short URL in the notice. So we had it as just for the committee's benefit. The notice that went out to property owners had the link that you can visit the project webpage, www.buildbrantford.ca/HCD consultation. So it wasn't a long, complex, URL that you were apt to put in, like, oh, did I miss a backslash, or is there a hyphen there and random characters? It was really short. We got our comms team to do that for us with it on the letter. I didn't see a lot of emails coming in to me, and every owner got my contact information in the letter. I know there was some discussion on Facebook. Unfortunately, I don't know if that really translated into people turning out, even to say they didn't like the idea. Those are community groups. Said we could look at other projects. Council could make a decision to try again and direct staff to do it. We just need a bit more funding, I think, in that case, and time to say, if you want us to really go to this neighborhood and spend the time to get, to tease out those opinions, then let us think of a different strategy and let us prepare a budget. But that's what I think we would need to really engage with the neighborhood. And I think my manager wants to chime in.
Yeah, I mean, the results are kind of disappointing. We were hoping that we'd get more interest, certainly when I was hoping one on the court, for example, but it, doesn't rise to the level of interest to show that it's really being driven by the neighborhood. So how do we continue to get the neighborhood interested in these types of issues? We have been working on that, and certainly the information that was prepared, and Patrick's a great advocate for this conversation, to talk about the benefits of being in the district, dispelling some of the misinformation that's out there about what it means. We're able to provide that, but yeah, again, the level of interest, just don't think it's there for us to take that next step, to have direction from council to go ahead with a district study. That might get some more people to come out. I don't know if it's necessarily a black or white. There probably are some people who are pretty apathetic, different, but yeah, kind of is what it is. There were some positives in the end, like we did have discussions with some people who were interested in perhaps pursuing an individual designation. We can keep on top of that, and hopefully we did spur some discussions within the neighborhoods that still ongoing between neighbors. Again, I'm thinking a lot of the court where most people in that court know each other, so we have had discussions, and the people who maybe didn't come out to the meeting are still hearing about it from their neighbors. So maybe we could loop back to them and
Just something.
time to.
I just want to note also, with these web pages, the public is able to subscribe to a web page. So before we had this meeting, before the agenda was published, about 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit later, we updated the webpage to provide links to the council and committee calendar. So it has a direct link to this meeting's webpage where the agenda would go and they could register to attend tonight's meeting. It has a direct link to the committee of the whole webpage in September that the companion report is going to, and then the link to the council decision. So once that update happened, I did get one email from an owner. I said, yeah, you can, we can't share the report details before it goes public because then you might hear through the grapevine, some owners are talking and then we have more games of telephone happening. But said, yeah, it will be public on this day. You will be able to review all the comments we received, all the responses on the board. So I haven't had a follow-up since then, but any property owner who decided to subscribe to that page is aware that these reports were coming and they can see this. We're not just leaving it on a council and committee calendar.
Anything else, Councillor Stanley?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, I would say too, that like the conversations that people did have with staff when they did come, that was very valuable, and I think that it did, like you said, dispel a lot of concerns and stuff like that. But I think what I was looking at was whether somewhere between hiring this history person and, that big expense, but something on a smaller scale maybe could be a compromise within this.
So through the chair, thinking out loud, there could be opportunities if there's support at council to have more discussions in wards or at a broader scale, and that might build a bit more interest. But we were limited with our existing department budget for this year. That would be something council would want to have to support when they consider the report.
Thank you.
Okay, Dan.
I did have a question, but I think it got answered, other than, I'm assuming with your report that the no-shows are taken as a no,
Correct.
and I believe that to be more of the advertising of the event, then they must not be getting the notices.
And so through the chair, just for clarity for the committee, we sent these notices to the exact same addresses we send tax bills to. So it is when the owner gives us an address saying, I want my tax information, that's the same address. We're not using different numbers. So it is going to hopefully where the owner will be looking at their notices.
Is there any chance of asking a local historian to do an article in the paper on Victory
Housing?
Victory Housing, so that people learn about it, and do an article, a separate article on why it should be, why we think it should be?
I'll say through chair. In that case, there's we didn't piggyback exactly, but the CIHC, Industrial Heritage Center, did actually have a virtual exhibit on cockshut molded aircraft. And so we, through the research they did, we did find a few articles that actually specifically talked about the Victory Housing neighborhood. And we used those in our display boards, those clippings of the actual news articles from the day about this neighborhood. But there's a little bit, obviously, a sort of cross posting in that way, like that they're increasing the presence. But as a district, we have to kind of target the property owners and get that support. So we can't really benefit from a wider community being interested if this consultation is also about a district. If it was just a telling histories project, we could probably open it up a lot more and you'd increase the scope, but you might actually increase the community interest in it. But we're targeted to specific areas because it came out of the register project.
I did read some Facebook posts
Yeah.
about the meetings, a lot of negative posts about it, and heritage, and they're trying to get us all designated and all whatever. I think we need to dispel some of that, whether it's an article about why we're doing it or why we'd want to do it, and describe a neighborhood that we want.
And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, we did have some of these discussions after January 30th. Staff came back with the report and we talked about, do we meet with the neighborhood associations? Do we have broader posts and like a media blitz on this? And the issue is also the confusion because of the conservation district component. If we advertise to everyone in Ward 2 or the city that, hey, we're asking residents in Ward 2 and Waterloo Court if they should be a district, we need a very clear way to filter out someone who's in Ward 4, Ward 4 or Ward 3 going, oh, that's such a cute neighborhood, I think you should designate it, and then getting an influx of responses, but none of them being the actual property owners. Certainly,
When
and
it comes time for their neighborhood, they know the
again,
story.
if their neighborhood was shortlisted, that's the caveat, right? We didn't have any neighborhoods in Ward 3 shortlisted to be a district that we would be consulting. We didn't have any neighborhoods in Ward 4. So again, if this was purely a neighborhood history project, it would look different, and the way we'd advertise it would be much broader. We were targeting specific property owners and specific boundaries. So it makes those sort of bigger advertisements a bit of a challenge, because are we starting to pull more people in who aren't directly affected by the district, right? As an owner, you might feel different if all of a sudden people outside of your neighborhood were saying it should be designated, and you and some of your neighbors aren't really sure what the impact is to you, right? The other individuals may not have, as the saying goes, they don't have skin in the game, right? They're not, if you feel on the fence, you might feel like, well, that's not fair. They shouldn't tell me what happens to my property if they're not under the same consideration. So we had to take a very targeted approach in this case. And maybe that's part of the reason we're seeing the low response rate.
Okay, I have Bev, and then I saw Pat's hand. Anyone else? Okay, okay, I'm getting overwhelmed. Saw Adam, Reese, and Tamara, did you have your hand up as well?
Big list of questions.
It's okay. By the end of that, it won't matter. Sorry. I just had a realtor opinion, but it's okay.
Okay, go ahead, Bev.
3 questions. What are the 3 next HCDs that are being considered? Is it set in stone that these will be looked at? And then thirdly, in terms of staff time, like this is a really ambitious effort to put forth these districts. And even at the best of times, it's hard to get a district program established. So is it possible that to direct staff to be looking at more individual designations than districts at this time, given the political climate that we only have a set time to designate our group A listing?
Yeah. So, okay, so again, there's 3 questions, right? I'm gonna try and make sure I get them all. So the first one is, what are the next 3 districts?
Yeah.
So the 2 that were originally directed that remain from the list of 5, that would be Lansdowne Park or the Dominion Steel neighborhood, and Lorne, Dufferin, Palmerston, that neighborhood. It was previously considered for a district twice, so we did let council know. It's still something we were directed to consult with those neighborhoods. The 6th district, potential district, is Erie Avenue. That was added later, just in response to what council had been hearing sort of through the Planning Act processes, any rezonings and developments on Erie Avenue. So that was added, but it wasn't a neighborhood that was called out in the register. That was the first question. Sorry, the second one.
Is it set in stone that you have to do?
Well, we had the council direction.
Okay.
So we got direction for all of them up front, and then we scheduled them as staff saying, okay, let's do 2 smaller ones before summer, and then we'll start with 1 big neighborhood. Just test out that, we can handle what we think is going to be the response rate and the number of people coming to the meetings. And now we have the 2 bigger neighborhoods plus Erie Avenue were scheduled for the fall, just to avoid the summer break. If we tried to hold a meeting in the summer, I think we get a lot of flack pretty quickly for, I wasn't around, I was on vacation. So we tried to do before school lets out for summer, and we're trying to do a few weeks after school's back in session and before Thanksgiving.
But if council were to change their direction to you,
as a result of, let's say,
as
this
a
report.
result of what's transpired
Mhm.
for the first 3 that have been looked at.
I mean, council clerks might have to correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe will give me side eye and say we can't really comment, but I think because we have the direction, it's reconsideration, and 2/3 of council would have to say forget about it. And if that happens, that happens. We, as staff, we can't do anything. But right now, we are planning for those neighborhood meetings to go ahead as council directed. And so it's more just about fine tuning the dates, making sure we have staff capacity and we have a space for them. The last question, part 4 designation. So yes, districts are very big projects that do require outside support. The thing about districts is they go from being, and sorry, not to exclude Councillor Samuel, because I'm looking at the group. The thing about the districts is, you know, some of them like Lorne and Dufferin, we have a number of Part 4 properties there. We have another group, a big group of Priority Group A properties and Priority Group B. So that would be a lot of properties to individually research, go ask property owners. And we have heard some members of council express concern about designating against owners' wishes. So with trying to get the districts, in some cases, it's about also helping dispel the myth or the combating the attitude of, well, this affects me, but then my neighbor can do whatever they want and I have to jump through red tape. And it's trying to reach out to that neighborhood that has a very distinctive character and saying, hey, you do have a very distinctive neighborhood. Would you like would you like the city to support your neighborhood's character being maintained? So we want to do that first and see if we got some broad-based support from some neighborhoods, because that would also, probably take off quite a bit from the workload of doing Part 4 sort of up and down each street every like second or third property. And it would be more comprehensive, right? It would be not just the individual properties, but if there's properties that are contributing, but we don't have a lot of background, we're not leaving a gap in the neighborhood where either someone feels my neighbor doesn't have to worry about this, or if something happens to that property, the city can't make it, can't make sure it fits our neighborhood character. But it's only these neighborhoods, right? That's why we're not going to neighborhood by neighborhood across the city.
And we know in theory, it all sounds very logical. However, you could flip it and say, the more individual designations, the more discussion between neighbors that they don't need to be as fearful of the designation.
Well, and with the grant program, like in some neighborhoods like Dufferin and Lorne, with those notices going out, I'm kind of visiting some already designated neighbors, and they do sometimes chat with each other. So Dufferin and Lorne's a different example. They might kind of hear about the benefits of heritage more than some other neighborhoods.
Okay, Pat.
My question was answered.
Okay, great. Adam.
Due to the lack of participation, could something like the storyboards in each district in a district park be kind of something that sheds light for the?
It certainly could. But then you might benefit from having the broader neighborhood, right? It's not just Victory Housing in Ward 5, it is telling the story of Eagle Place and spreading that throughout the neighborhood. That might be even more successful. So again, we were just really focused, and we thought maybe if we saw a lot of turnout and there wasn't support for the district, we'd see a lot of support in that neighborhood for the storyboards. And again, just the overall response rate was still pretty low. So.
Okay, please.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it might be more effective rather than creating installations in different areas, just to, Dan had said earlier about increasing just general education about, the history of Brantford and some of these neighborhoods. Yeah, maybe that's something that can happen as a first step to build interest. Because a lot of the outreach that we do from this planning portfolio is pretty much tied to designation, providing information to the designated properties or the districts about our Heritage Grant program, for example. It's usually directed at people who are kind of already involved in some way. Sending that information out to the broader public. So the idea of a newspaper article, that type of thing to hopefully reach more people to get it in people's minds of the history of the area that they might live in. Could be something that will help build that support over time. We're hoping to get more people out to the Duffer neighborhood, just based on history and what's transpired in the past. And at that time, we didn't have the grant program as well. Something. It's not that we can't come back to these things, just that we need to kind of more education to get the support where it's going to be more driven.
Okay, please.
That's the one.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Okay, so maybe it's 3 questions. They kind of lump into each other. One thing I'm wondering is in regards to the information about what alterations and things like that can be made is, because we used to have something like that in the past, and different heritage committee talking about too. Is there a brochure and like a PDF document on the city's website? Because I think other municipalities might have this that specifically explains what is and is not designation. So it's laid out for them that maybe if they can't make it to that meeting, they can go on the website and view that for themselves, or you could send it to someone that way. And then if you, I don't know if you want to answer, you want me to ask a few
No,
more things?
I'll answer one at a time because that way I won't forget. So for this project specifically, we did have one board just dedicated to that information. And then on the website, there was a whole frequently asked questions. And it's actually one we even had going back to the register project.
Right.
But we've never had a brochure that we sent out sort of to every property owner. Now, the other thing is with the register project, we did have a second letter with, one, your property is being considered, followed by your property has been listed. That second notice also came with a letter saying, by the way, we have a heritage grant program. And this is what it offers. If you're interested in requesting designation, if your property is designated, you'd be eligible for this assistance. I'm actually 2 weeks ago, I got an email from someone saying, hey, I got this letter from you in 2022 from a listed property. I want to do this work. And that's what I said. The program exists, but it's for designated properties. If you had more information you could provide and were interested in designation, and I had some questions for them, but I never heard back. So we did sometimes get I got emails about, I got this letter and my property's listed. What can I, can you tell me more about it? But if I try like that discussion never really went anywhere. And the people who emailed me, they were interested in the program, but then when they realized, okay, well, they'd have to research my property, then pass a bylaw, but then I could get the grant, it's kind of just went radio silent. So we kind of tried it. It introduced a little bit of confusion, but I wouldn't like write it off. Some of those brochures were talked about, they're better targeted at those designated property owners. So, hey, every year, having that up on our website or the FAQ, all property owners who are designated. Remember, your property is designated, but you can get the grant program. If you're doing this kind of work, reach out, we can try and help you and clarify, if it's eligible for assistance. But something for the broader community would be a different kind of document to hopefully not create that confusion, right? To entice people, but not make it all about, I want the money, you can't have it, then radio silence, right?
Part of the reason I wondered, I thought the Brant County had something on the website that specifically was like a PDF document explaining what is, not necessarily heritage districts, but what is an designation. So I wondered if we had something like that. Also, when we did have the heritage inventory, I know it got changed over time, but there used to be a landing page that explained exactly what heritage designations were and weren't. And there was even a section that described what heritage districts were or weren't and things like that. And I think it's missing that our city doesn't have something like that on our website, because I think just in general, that being informative and something people could be sent to look at, because it can be maybe intimidating if the municipality's like, hey, come to this meeting kind of thing, whereas they kind of go on their own. So I had that concern, and I guess that's the gist of it. I just think that more information should be out there, and I think that's something that if other municipalities are doing it, I think we should, because again, with the heritage inventory, and I mean the inventory being gone, there is a part that is missing from our website. And I know for time that changed where you couldn't access those pieces unless you went hunting and seeking for it. But that used to be the landing page, explaining what the heritage inventory was and what all things were. And I wondered, sorry, about the storyboards. I kind of mentioned it before, but I'll kind of mention again. Is it something you could just have on there? Because that is research that's available, and I imagine it would be public information as far as neighborhoods. And just have something that, like that information available for people to see, and then as that research is done, it's just information. It's just good to have.
So to that, and we'll just clarify some other things for the committee since you touched on them. So the inventory has been taken offline from the website. We have backed it up into PDF pages of each property record because the actual database was a security risk after Hamilton got hacked. Our IT department is looking at every potential liability. So that said, our IT department is looking at putting that data back up on the open data webpage that Brantford maintains. So it's still going to be online. We just had to take it down for the short term, and our IT department, they are actually looking at how to bring it back up in a way that won't be a liability. So it's not gone forever. We're just changing the look of it. Those landing page, like sort of Q&A, that was on the Register Projects webpage. I had links to, on top of what designation is, I had links to the Ontario Heritage Trust's page on heritage designation and districts. I had links to studies that were done on property value and resale, and several studies, some by, again, Ontario Real Estate Association, some by McMaster and other firms that had looked at what the impact was on designation and resale. Like, we tried to go at this from every sort of angle. You know, are my taxes going to go up? Like that question of, is this going to impact my property value? There's actually different ways it can do that, whether it's taxes, resale, or insurance. And we tried to answer each of those questions in a way that showed, you know, you don't have to be scared of designation. We tried to answer those questions on that page that we gave people the link to in our notice. The web page is still up. It's something we're certainly going to migrate to the main heritage page when we're done. We're not going to give up on those FAQs. But we, you know, people need to go to that page. Otherwise, I'm sending them like a 500-page document in the mail, and I know that's not going to go anywhere. So we are trying to provide those resources, but you know, people do have to go look at them themselves. I can't, unfortunately, just convince them. I'm not psychic. I can't project that through the mail to a property owner, but like, hey, it's fine, don't worry.
And I just fully appreciate all the work that's been done. I didn't want me to sound
No,
criticism or anything.
no,
It's a lot of work.
yeah, and none of that read as a sort of a critique, but yes, these are things we did try to do to put it up front, and then the web being the most sort of accessible, right? You got one sheet front and back. Half of it was like one page was the picture of your neighborhood, right? It wasn't a lot to read. We tried to get everything that we could in that document, but people need to choose to kind of go to it.
Hey, Tamara, did you, everything's good on your end, or did you want to ask a question for Patrick?
You know, I will make a fun comment. I know that there was quite a bit of chatter on Facebook groups for the neighborhoods, and of course, because it's Facebook, it was all, you know, mostly negative anyway. I'm just wondering, Patrick, but the ones that actually came to the pics, like, were they already with a mindset, or were you able to sort of, you know, persuade them into, you know, appreciating the fact that it could be a designated area?
So through you, Chair, the individuals attended Waterloo Court, as we kind of reported. Those were the ones who were in favor of
Already
it.
in
With the
it,
one
yeah.
exception, downtown was the reverse. They weren't supportive of the district, but it was a pleasant surprise that after we talked about designation, the scope of it, the one property said, okay, well, maybe let's keep talking about it, but I'm not committing to anything. So
Okay.
I would
Yeah.
say that was, I think, maybe a bit of a, okay, like, you know, we challenged their preconceived notions, but in a way that they thought, okay, let's explore this.
Yeah.
With Victory Housing, it was a bit more mixed. I think a lot of the conversations were cases of, I'm not really sure what this is, and I'm concerned about the impact because it's my property where I live.
Yeah.
at that meeting, I would say it seemed like we were making a bit of progress with individuals, but then as I went back and looked at the actual responses we got, our sort of response forms, it did seem much more
Comments.
split, where it seemed a little bit more like, oh, okay, so this isn't so bad, like this is what you want to do. And we had those examples of, in the case of Victory Housing, there's a Victory Housing district in Kitchener that's been designated since the early 2000s. So we pulled some of those examples right out of their study to show them, you wouldn't be the only ones. Like this has worked. Like, and there are other neighborhoods that are recognized just like yours.
Yeah.
So the people who spoke to us seemed to come around a little bit. Some didn't change their opinion, which is their right. But we got a bit of that, yes. I think just in the end, it didn't transition into enough broad-based community interest.
And I think because there were so many houses in the Victory Housing area, like I did get a few calls from realtors, and of course, like the concern, right, is that it would affect value down there, and so it's almost, yeah, like I almost had to do an education session for each person that came. It's like this actually increases value in the area, and like improves, most people put effort into curb appeal and bettering the neighborhood. So yeah, there's a lot of misconception out there, and from people who you would think that would know better too. So yeah, I guess just more education going forward in general. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. I have some questions. So we had a requirement that 50% of the owners respond or
No, so
favor.
when we brought after January 3rd's direction from council, we brought a report back to committee as staff saying, here's our plan, and it was a chance for the committee to comment on, are there any gaps or other strategies? And that's where he said, for a district to succeed, it really benefits from a supermajority. So as staff, we said we would not be recommending a district if we, with a simple majority of 50% of owners plus one, we wouldn't feel comfortable recommending a district with the expectation that it would actually succeed. The district itself, though, doesn't require property owners to approve it, but it is appealable to the OLT for a binding decision. It's a big project. We'd have to bring it to council to get that direction. We wanted to be able to go and say, for a full district, this neighborhood, wants the district. The majority of owners in this area like this idea, because that would make it successful. Possibly we could go with individual designations for the owners who are interested, and every one of those properties could theoretically get designated individually, but it would leave a lot of gaps of one designated property here, right? Because it affects everyone. And I think actually some members of the committee were concerned about just, there's also the flip side of the district. If I don't want it, but now I'm stuck with the regulations. If you're not, if you're not sort of supportive to that idea, yes, that's still a challenge we encounter with the district too.
So I am kind of acting in hindsight here, but if council required 2/3 majority of every property owner kind of to do something, council wouldn't make any decisions. So I think that 50% or 2/3 threshold is kind of, I don't know, made to fail in some ways. Like we're never gonna get anywhere. But when you do look at the number of people who did actually show up, and like kind of building off of Sandra's point, and the complacency of people, if they were upset with that, they would have shown up. And so I know, like, of the people for the Waterloo Court one, 75% of the people who actually, showed up. If we take those numbers of the people who actually showed up, 75% wanted it. So therefore, we should kind of have it. And then two, looking at those numbers with like with the ones who were interested in research, I didn't notice any for the commercial downtown, but the other one for Victory Housing, basically 2/3 were in support of research. And the other one, the first one, it was more, I want to say. I wrote it down somewhere, but I've lost it. So like those two thresholds to me say like that means that research should be conducted. So maybe if it's over 50% of people consulted are interested in further research, maybe that is kind of like a threshold that we can consider, and then do that research to do something like some other people have suggested with heritage placking or interpretive placking in a neighborhood park or something like that, that kind of tells the history based on that research. Another thing that, you know, a hindsight lesson that I think I've taken from this is in the downtown one, we didn't ask designated property owners about their interest in the HCD. And having the perspective of someone whose house is already, or property is already designated, you know, if they are in favor of it, they are too a neighbor in that neighborhood. They're not going to be captured, you know, they're already designated under another part of the act, but asking them if they are in favor, because then that also builds the neighborhood and the entire neighborhood, right? You're involving those owners. I know in the downtown, I think a bunch of them were city-owned properties, so consulting with the city doesn't work. But if it were another private individual, you know, I think an interest of the designated property owner should also be considered in that. And then back to the, I guess, back to the education piece or the research piece, that could be something that could be in a future request to council, you know, maybe stemming out of this. It's okay, we heard that, you know, a certain majority were interested in more research being conducted. So that goes into a budget request of, hey, we want to do, you know, research on the Victory Housing neighborhood, or, and then the report kind of backs that up with the numbers of input that we received. And like the people, if the people were, you know, the people got the notice and they didn't want an HCD, like a lot of the Facebook conversation would have happened, they would have been angry and they would have shown up, and they didn't show up. So if they didn't show up, then they really didn't want to have their voice heard. And the people who did take the time to actually show up, you know, perhaps we need to give them some more weight in these things. So I think I asked some questions in there. Maybe not. Maybe not. Oh, yeah, maybe not.
So I can speak to some of the topics you raised. I would say, so for downtown specifically, we had some designated properties in that area. Yes, some of them are owned by the city, but I believe the Temple building is individually designated. They still received a notice of the consultation. We didn't exclude properties if they were designated. Every property in a boundary that we drew for those maps has got a notice, or will get one in the second round. So the individually designated properties in the Dufferin and Lorne neighborhood will get notices for the HCD. We're not going to leave those out. Like I said, could further historic research build support? I absolutely think it could, but the consultation on this specific neighborhoods before you was not a lot. So then maybe the consultation strategy should be broader based. But we also need to be cognizant that our department deals with real property and usually someone else's, not city-owned facilities. Adrienne and the culture group maintain the city's public art. So before we could say, hey, we have a great idea, you know, we need to be having those discussions with our counterparts too, because, you know, we wouldn't like it if we found out that Public Works increased our workload tenfold, and culture wouldn't like it if we did that to them. So we can have those conversations internally. We can have conversations with parks, but the scope of this project wasn't that broader, you know, let's go to the neighborhoods and float some ideas for, you know, for large swaths of the city. It was very targeted. So we're just saying, based on what we heard from these specific boundaries and the property owners within them, we don't see a project that the city, you know, that we can comfortably say there's a lot of interest in this specific geography, and that, you know, the risk is we get looked at as like, oh, great, here is the city being we're the government and we're here to help you. And the perception being from those who are disinterested being, well, I never asked for this. If you wanted to help me, you lower my property taxes or some other comment, right? There's something else that's concerning to that particular owner. So we just focus on these neighborhoods, not saying that the research couldn't build that interest, but not in these areas, I don't think at this time.
Good. I think we've, everyone's had a lot to say about this, which is great. Had some good discussion. I threw out some other elements, so, everyone has spoken once, but, Dan, you want to speak for a second time?
I don't want to keep dragging it through the mud. But, so, from my years of dealing with heritage buildings and talking to people, I would say that there about 2% of people know the difference between a listed house and a designated house. Even less know about a district. But the good thing is that about 99% of people think that if your house is designated, you can't do anything on the inside or the outside. And hardly anybody knows about the Heritage Grant. And I don't know if the Crystal Cottage got the grant or not, but that might be a good news story to say, this is what happens if your house is designated. This is what if it's listed. And the grants, I think the education is the most important part of it. Broad across the whole city, not just 5 houses.
So through the chair, we do the mail outs to all the designated properties about the grant program. So I actually have been, I think maybe some of my colleagues, when I'm in the office to do front counter duty with them, might dislike me a little bit because I tend to get 2 or 3 meetings a week with property owners interested in the grant program. So we can look at, media posts or something in the new year, trying to get people before they start their projects. It might be a bad time to do it now, saying, hey, there's a grant program. Everyone's rushing in and, oh, you can't do your work until December because you're trying to get me the paperwork. But we can look at social media blitz with our comms team, or like sort of an ad in the paper to an extent.
Just an article.
Yeah.
Like a
Well,
write-up.
and we do have a partial draw allowed from the grant program funding for like mailouts and notice. So we could look and see what the cost would be for some other avenues. I mean, to post something on our Facebook page as the city or through other social media, I don't think that would be a cost, but like just what other avenues there are, or something we could look at as staff and plan for something for the new year, just to raise that profile. And any owner who was consulted for this project or who would be, asked about their interest in a Part 4 designation, they would get sort of a comment about the grant program exists and you could benefit in this way. So we are trying to tell those owners we're canvassing for interest about the program. We're trying to reach them, and there's an FAQ accordion on our webpage about that. We are trying to put that information there. Unfortunately, we just can't, can't force them to engage with it.
My other one would be probably about 10% of people go on the city website.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Samuel.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add to what Dan was saying and just suggest that something that might be nice to look at, if possible, and that's my question, if possible, is actually having people that have gone through designation be the people that are kind of talking about what it means to be designated, and that way it's not just all coming from the city. So I don't know if there's any kind of budget to kind of incorporate that. I was talking about a good news story where the story is kind of about the Crystal Cottage, but then it talks about the designation and the grant and stuff like that in it, so people will read it.
We can certainly talk to owners who get the grant, because we're frequently back and forth, like saying, okay, yeah, this
Those
is the
kind of
right
good news
details, here's the
stories, I
grant,
think,
like
are
we're
what's gonna
reaching out
impact
to
it.
them.
Yeah.
For you.
Okay, anyone else before we get to motion? Okay, thank you everyone for your discussion, your insights on this. I think it was good to hear what kind of viewpoints at the different times. So we have a motion that this be received, and Lisa's drafted some comments. So she's gonna read those.
Can we read them? So just based on the discussion, some of the things that folks have brought up, couple points I've made here. Brantford Heritage Committee recommends that further consultation and education, for example, social media, be completed with Conservation District property owners. The Brantford Heritage Committee would support staff pivoting towards looking at specific heritage properties if there is not enough interest in the creation of conservation districts. Brantford Heritage Committee suggests staff consider creating artistic storyboards for each proposed conservation district to highlight the history of each neighborhood. The Brantford Heritage Committee recommends staff provide education materials that explain the specific impacts of designation in each district.
Okay.
We can remove, add, change any of those. That's just from the discussion, sort of where I've started as a jumping off point.
So can we have a mover to receive and have comments first? Dan, and seconded by Pat. Okay, any additional how about that first? Any additional comments that people want to be added? Maybe can you put that up on the screen? Maybe that might be helpful to people virtually and people in the room as well. And I don't know how to see people virtually. Some of them have
Great. If people virtually want to.
okay. Oh yeah, that's great. Thank you. Tech wizard. Okay. So I would like to add a comment about the requirement of 2/3 of property owners wanting a district in order for a district to move forward is unrealistic. And in the first part, can we change the wording slightly? Completed with property owners of potential conservation districts, right? Because yeah, okay. Anyone else have any comments that we haven't captured?
I have a question about clarification about one of the comments up there.
Sure.
So the one that says that the Brantford Heritage Committee supports staff pivoting towards, the one that says about like if they want to go to individual designation instead of districts. Is that what we're looking at? Is instead of the districts, the other ones going forward for consultation? Is that what that was meant to be?
So through the chair, just for context, the way that I create comments is just based on as people talk, the different ideas that come up. If there's support amongst the table, then it ends up on the list. And then like, for example, in the last item where we had comments, that provided a comment, but the committee didn't vote to actually include that as a formal comment. So then it just didn't go forward as a formal comment. So like through discussion, I'm just kind of keeping track of the discussion.
I just want to clarify
If
what
there's
that
not
means, if we support that going forward to council. I want to just be clear on what we're actually recommending though. And
So-
that's why I wanted to ask.
Happy to workshop the wording or remove it altogether.
Did you have something that did you have a suggested wording or something?
No, I don't. I just wanted clarification about what I would be supporting or not supporting as far as like these comments that we're gonna send forward.
Okay.
So yeah, my understanding is you just don't want it to look like we're saying let's abandon
Right.
all of this.
Yeah,
And
thank
for
you
the
putting that
committee,
into words, because that's what I don't want to have happen from this, is I don't want that to be the direction we're kind of suggesting to council, is that they just scrap what we're already planning to.
and I do want to clarify for the committee, we're not doing part 4, like consultation with owners. We have the list of properties that weren't in potential districts. Committee has talked about that in the past. We brought it forward. That was always part of the plan, is reaching out to those properties. And we always said with this consultation, if we don't have enough interest for a district, that doesn't take every property off the table. we could still reach out to those who said, yes, I'm interested in a district, and say, are you some individual designation? That's in our report, that's in the sort of the conclusion and the bottom of the analysis. We're still doing that.
Maybe you just need to strike towards,
And just say, or yeah, it says support only. And perhaps we can say individual rather than specific heritage properties, individually designated properties.
It looks like Beth has a comment too. over there.
No,
Sandra does.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's Sandra.
I would like to see that removed. I think that's premature.
Okay,
I mean, we're going after districts. This already exists. We are still interested in individual. That's the status quo. And I think this is premature.
how about if it was worded such that in the case where districts haven't received positive feedback, that the information gained from those meetings be used to look into future individual designations.
Which is the
That'd be
status
more-
It's
quo.
more agreeable
Yeah.
to me, yeah. I just don't want to lose the momentum of what they're trying to do.
Mhm.
I hear you.
And have that, whether that's the fallback versus the plan.
If. Can you just repeat what you said?
Should a heritage district not be, should the, yeah, support for district not be received, the information obtained from the process, from the discussions, from the picks, be used for possible individual designations. No, that's still awkward.
Why don't we just remove it for the time being? And I'm sure there's gonna be future discussion, especially when we look at the other 3 districts. And then maybe bring that in, because you're kind of talking about the status quo already, and when the information comes out, they'll use it. This information is not disappearing.
But it draws
So,
attention to the fact that there is value in
for sure,
having
but
these.
that's a given too, I think.
okay, Dan.
I think it should be gone as well, because I think that we didn't give the first round a fair shake, and I think I don't think it was advertised properly. I don't think that people knew about it properly. I think that I'm not gonna say it should be done again, but it should be done again, because there not enough people came out, and we're taking the no-shows as a no instead of a yes. And now we're jumping right into designation on single family or single houses.
Okay. I think I'm gonna do, we can do a clause by clause. So does anyone have anything else that they want to consider changing the wording of, or any additional comment before we do a clause by clause vote on each clause? Okay, yeah, I think my vote was captured, so I think I'm okay. Okay, so we'll do clause by clause. So I guess I'll read the clause. I'm just gonna vote on mention the subclauses for the comments, okay? So for clause I, that the Heritage Committee recommends the further consultation and education, example, social media, be completed with the potential conservation district property owners. All those in favor? Okay, thank you, Carrie. Clause 2, the Brantford Heritage Committee recommends that if a heritage district
Support for a heritage district.
that support for a heritage district not be received, the information provided from the PICs be used for individually designating heritage properties. All those in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Okay, I declare that defeated. Clause 3, That the Heritage Committee suggests staff consider creating artistic storyboards for each proposed conservation district to highlight the history of each neighborhood. All those in favor? Okay, any opposed? Okay, I declare that carried. Thank you. Clause 4, that the Heritage Committee recommends staff provide the education materials that explain specific impacts of heritage designation in each district. All those in favor? Okay, any opposed? Okay, I declare that carried. The last clause, the Brantford Heritage Committee suggests that the requirement to have the support of 2/3 of a district is unrealistic. All those in favor? Okay, any opposed? Okay, I declare that carried. And now we'll vote on receiving and all of the comments together as well, because we didn't pass the actual motion yet. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, I declare that carried. Thank you, everyone, for that very long and fruitful discussion. I appreciate everyone's time and everyone's patience, but I think we had a great discussion there about a way forward. So we'll now move on to 4.6, which is composition review of the Heritage Committee. We have a report before us, and the motion is that it be received and any comments that we have be forwarded to the committee review task force. So does anyone have any comments that they would like to be added about this report? Yeah.
Just to be clear, because I tried to read that, that's part of this will be removing days from C, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I don't know how you put it in comments. I have concerns about that and was almost asking somehow that part could be a separate book, potentially different. I don't know if you can do that because it's part of the report.
So through the chair, the recommendation to remove ACO, if you approve the report today, does not automatically remove ACO. The committee review task force will consider that recommendation as part of a report coming in September, which would then go to council for their final consideration. If you have concerns about the removal of ACO, my recommendation would be to provide comments with the rationale as to why you have those concerns at this time, which would then be forwarded to the committee, and the committee could then take those comments under advisement when they make their decision.
Through the chair, if I may just to speak to that recommendation, because I had been asked by Juan, who's on vacation right now, about that. So in my time here, we haven't had an ACO rep. I'm not aware when we last had an ACO rep, but one of the comments was it's just a seat that hasn't been filled in a long time. And that was the reason that particular one was recommended for removal. So just to provide that background. That's all.
Sandra?
So is this something to do with quorum? Is that why we're removing this? Because someone hasn't filled the position?
So through the chair, chapter 26 lays out the terms of reference for this committee. So it lays out the number of citizen members and then the number of liaisons, and specifically lists the types of liaisons. And because we haven't been able to fill the seat, it's sort of a redundancy that there's no one from ACO coming forward to come to the meeting. So the thinking is that moving forward, we could recommend that instead of that seat not be filled by an ACO member, we could add another citizen member, or look and see if there's other liaison opportunities within the community that we could invite to sit on the committee as an alternative. But it doesn't make sense at this time, because the seat has not been filled for so long, to continue recommending that somebody fill that seat.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Please, want to say something else?
Yeah, so in regard to comments, the concerns I have and the reason I want, yes, we haven't had the ACO seat for a very long time, part because some people passed away, and the ACO Brantford Brant kind of fell away, although it was existing back in the 70s through the 80s up till early 90s before that. But my thought was, and I did contact some of council about this, but I didn't hear back, so I didn't know it was consideration. I tried to contact our Architectural Conservatory of Ontario this summer. It's hard to get a hold of anybody. My thought was, why I wanted to consider if that could be deferred is my thought was that you could still have that seat. And if someone had a member at large membership, while there isn't a Brantford Brant membership at this time, you could have someone else that the ACO Ontario itself could appoint for council to consider to be on this committee. And then, like if I could say it this way, that's something I would be interested in the future. And then my seat potentially would open up to another citizen volunteer specifically. So that's one thing I had wondered in the future if there was that option to do that, because there are people that do have that ACO liaison seat in their heritage committees. They do have active ACOs, but I think there might even be members at large that appear at least virtually, if not in person. I don't know that for sure, because again, I tried to reach out to the ACO and I didn't get an answer for the summer. So that was kind of my reasoning for it, as well as one other thing it does open you up to is for with our heritage conferences and things like that, we might be able to send one, if not two, from heritage committee, just based on the budget of the committee. Whereas if you are a member of ACO, you do have that option to have that discount to go if someone else wanted to choose to go on their own. But you also have to be a member of certain groups and things to even be able to go to those things. So that was something I thought in the future might be beneficial to have something report back to committee based on that. I do remember when we had an ACO, it started in about 2009. And I know that maybe the last time we had, I even think, Nathan, when you first came in, but you weren't chair yet, we did still have someone in the room for a time that was ACO. But we didn't quite have all the reports and things like that. But it was just something I thought was important to consider keeping forward, or at least looking at if there is that option, that we could have someone appointed, even if there isn't their own local branch, because we do have neighboring branches in Hamilton, etc., all over London, you name it, they're all very active. So those were my reasonings. I don't know how you want to phrase that as comments. I just think it may be beneficial to have, especially if, just an example, I'm not saying it would be, but if the option was that I had a member at large and I could apply to the city to be like, may I fill that seat? But then it also opens up another volunteer opportunity, because I know the concern is over time that you should open that volunteering to other people as well. So that's my concerns, and kind of why I have my reason for it. Sorry, it's wordy.
Can you speak to how liaison positions get appointed, or like how that works?
So
for some clarity?
right now the way liaison positions work is we approach the liaison organization and advise them that we have a vacancy. It's up to them through their board of directors or management structure to come up with a name that will be forwarded to us. They have to provide something in writing to us that says that they are going to be appointed to the committee. So Pat, I believe you are from the Historical Society. Yes. The board would have had to come up with some kind of letter letting us know that that was going to be the case. That letter then gets forwarded to the city's appointments committee, and appointments reviews the letter and will make a determination recommending to council.
I'm a liaison.
Yeah, there's a number of liaisons on the committee that is the case. And so ACO or whatever organization would have to make that recommendation to the appointments committee for their consideration. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Samuel.
So my question would be, when was the last time we let them know that we have an open spot, and was there any response?
So committee process, so I couldn't give you an exact date, but I know as recently as last year, there was an attempt made to contact ACO. Because there's no Brantford Brant chapter, it's again very hard to get a hold of anyone in order to get a name to be put forward.
So I think kind of along the lines of what Lisa was saying is that I think there's value in putting a little more effort into seeing if we could have somebody even from another branch participating even virtually. Thank you.
Okay. So maybe now, since we have a comment and there's been some discussion, maybe I should ask for a motion to receive and for comments. Moved by Sandra, seconded by Dan. Okay. Any further discussion on this and comment? Yes.
So could we defer this just to, let's say, to a meeting in a few months when they're back and someone actually have a conversation with the ACO before we decide? Because if they're gonna still say they're not, if, you know, no one's gonna support it, then maybe we could look at this again.
So if we do a deferral, it has to be to a specific time and place. So it can be
So
to
that's-
a January Brantford Heritage Committee meeting or something.
That,
Or
that would
whatever
be fine.
date or time you would want to defer it
I'm thinking more November. We should know. November meeting.
to. Defer to the November meeting?
And then we should be able to, if we can't speak to these people by November, you know, maybe we should look at not having the position.
Okay, so then we would need a second for the deferral.
So just through the chair, just as a reminder, the committee review task force is making decisions about these recommendations at the September cycle.
Yeah.
Just timeline wise, I'm not discouraging you from making the deferral at all, but just making sure that's into your thinking as well about how planning things moving forward.
I guess, how soon can you contact somebody?
I can, I would call my phone tomorrow and send emails and do what I can, even if it means reaching another branch, because I'm pretty sure you can get a hold of the Hamilton branch, is pretty active. We're in London, if I could figure it out that way.
So even if we weren't if we were to defer this to September, even then, that would not give the task force the time requirements that.
Unfortunately, no, because the September meeting would be after the cycle. What I may recommend as an alternative is as a comment, you recommend that staff reach out on the committee's behalf to see if there would be any interest, and then we can put any feedback or information we get into the recommendation that goes to the committee review task force. And then we can make a point as staff to circulate that recommendation to this committee so that you're aware of what's played out. And then should the recommendation still be that the seat be removed when it makes its way through to council, the committee or members would have an opportunity to delegate to council and make their case at council.
What you said, exactly, that's, if you remember that phrasing, that's what I would like to recommend. If I can.
So you're gonna write that down? Well, while you're writing that down, I saw a counselor say,
Yeah,
well,
no, I think she really just answered my question as well, as I was gonna ask if it was more appropriate to make sure that we sent the comments through to make sure that our voice is heard now versus deferring, so it was answered fine. I'm good.
okay.
Right, and I didn't.
So everyone, any other comments before I ask you to put it up on the screen so we can read it and understand what we will be voting on. Okay, here we go, guys. Here's the. Okay, here we go. So here's the motion with the comment. Okay, any further discussion on that, on the wording of that? Everyone's happy? Okay, then I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Okay, carried. Moving on. 4.7, we're almost there. William Muirhead's biography. So there was a report circulated with draft biography. This is time for us to receive it and forward the draft biography to committee of the whole. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that motion? Moved by Councillor Samuel, seconded by Dan. Any discussion on Councillor Muirhead's bio? Okay, oh, sorry, Bev, go ahead.
Not a discussion. I just find bylaw number 1 quite intriguing.
Okay, bylaw number 1, this is one to prevent horses from running around.
Yeah, no horses and no pigs downtown running around.
It was an ongoing concern back then, let me tell you. Okay.
How far we've come.
Remember the day.
So, no further discussion, I'll call the question, all those in favor? Thank you, declare that carried. Consent items, we have minutes from our June meeting, because we did meet in July. Just a question, Adam is noted as both present and sending regrets.
Through the chair, as it's been mentioned, I'm just doing coverage. Adam, were you at the meeting?
I was not.
Okay, I will make a point if it's okay with the committee, if that change is friendly, I will change that for you.
It's not that often that I catch something like that.
Is anyone else on that list also in 2 places at once?
I didn't see anyone else.
I
Oh
really
no,
wanted to be
Denise
there.
is there as well. She's both present and absent.
Is Denise with us?
She was on there.
She was. Denise, were you at the last meeting?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you for clarifying.
I just had
So
to
we'll also correct
grab
that.
some water.
I think we started with everyone present, and we forgot to use some people. Okay. So with those friendly amendments, I will entertain a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes. Sandra, seconded by Lise. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, call the question, all those in favor? Thank you, declare that carried. There are no resolutions, no notices of motion. I'm waiting for a motion to adjourn. Dan! Thanks, everyone. A little bit past my goal of 8, but not too bad. So we'll look forward to seeing everyone in September. Thanks.